have the great honor of introducing one of my dearest friends, someone that I've known for a considerable amount of time, and have been so impressed with her background and her work. So, Anna, it's so good to have you with us today. How have you been?
It's great to see you, Ignacio, and thank you. I have actually been well. The pandemic has been as much a struggle for me as it has for pretty much every household in the United States. But I've learned that we all are pretty resilient and we can pull it together when we need to. And I've acquired a few skills during the process, so I've been well.
I know that you lived in Washington, D.C. for a number of years, which is where I first met you, and you had your family there, et cetera. But right now you're in California, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, oh, that's good. You've settled, in a sense, gone home, for the most part, right?
It is, yeah, absolutely correct. I was born and raised in California. We went back east when I got a chance to go to graduate school at Harvard. We ended up staying in Washington, D.C. We thought we were going to be there for 1 year. We were there for more than 30. My kids think they're
Right.
from the area, but they were actually all born in California. And I guess the biggest challenge with the pandemic is that we've had to learn how to communicate with one another differently. So we've learned to play family game night on Zoom and have lots
Ah,
of conferences and calls. And so that added to all of the work experience. So it's been good. It's been actually very good.
you've had such an impressive career over your life, and everyone would assume that you've always had it easy, that you had a good path to follow, but we all know that that's not the case. And you had an upbringing in California. Can you tell us a little bit of your story? What it was like growing up in California, your family background, and how you eventually ended up going to college.
Absolutely. Well, I'm a native, as I mentioned, but I'm also a fourth generation farm worker family. So my great grandparents came from Mexico, and the only jobs they could find were to work in the fields. My grandparents worked in the fields after them. My parents both work in the fields. I worked in the fields for a little bit, and I have many cousins who still work in the fields. So that was largely because very few of them had any really traditional educational experience. And I just assumed I would get a great job. My parents' dream was for me to graduate high school because they had dropped out in the eighth and the
Sure,
ninth grade. And
sure.
if it weren't for the fact that a high school math teacher heard that I was leaving school early to get a job and convinced me to apply to college, my life would have been very different. But he cared enough to go the extra mile, and I try to live up to his example every single day. We grew up very, very poor, and an education really changed the quality of my life and the quality of the lives of my parents and my brothers and sisters and my own children. So uh, I was really fortunate to be able to get a great education in the University of California and go on from there to marry a man who was very supportive of education and encouraged me to continue to move forward. So that's pretty much my story.
But you're the oldest in the family, correct?
I am. I'm the oldest of five children. All of my brothers and sisters did well. None of them went to college, but they all graduated high school and they all got additional training, technical training after high school. They've all worked very hard and they've got solid sets of skills and and their children have gone on to go to college. So this is really a wonderful thing. Education is incredibly important in terms of the doors that it opens. It doesn't necessarily have to be a formal education, doesn't have to necessarily be graduate education, but acquiring skills is critical to surviving in this economy and being a good part of, a full participating member of society.
Sure, sure. So, when you were young, growing up in California, in your mind, you had an idea of what you might do one day as you were, growing up, and you graduated high school, what, at the age of 16, was it?
I did. I graduated early because, to be honest, we were hungry. My father had not been able to work for quite a number of years. We had been living on welfare. When he finally did get back to work, it was a work he invented. He used to collect metal scrap on the sides of, the corners, what people threw away, and we'd sell it back to the
Sure.
metal scrap yard. And as the eldest of four, my mom had a lot of mental illness she was dealing with. I was just trying to help my dad make ends meet. I had an after school job, had weekend jobs, and I thought if I graduate early, because I'd done really well, I was a good student, I love school, I could go get a job at McDonald's and really put some meat on the table, which is really literally what I was trying to do. And I ended up doing something a little different. It worked out well for us. It was a little frightening, but in the end, it was the right decision.
Sure. So, when you're at that age and you're, envisioning yourself being at McDonald's, but you end up at Harvard, you end up at George Mason, where you get a law degree. Did you think that was realistic when you were growing up?
I had no clue. I mean, no one in my family had ever gone to college. So I had no idea about what the world had to offer. It was like, I didn't have any much of an ability to imagine those things. And quite frankly, it wasn't necessarily an easy path because I had no role models. I didn't really know how to get from point A to point B very easily. So I started college at 16, but to be quite frank with you, by the time I was 18, I married and had started having children. So I dropped out of college, had 4 children, then went back to college to get my degree. I mentioned my husband was very supportive of my continuing my education, and then applied to Harvard with 4 kids. I took those 4 kids to class with me at Harvard while I got a graduate degree. And then I had planned to go to law school almost immediately, but my oldest at that point was turning 11. She was very much in need of much more parental attention, and I couldn't handle graduate school and dealing with what she needed. And so I put off law school. I didn't return to law school until my youngest went off to college. So I did it in my 40s. So like I said, it wasn't a straight path. It was very interesting, a bit circuitous, but I stayed with it because it was what I loved and what I really believed was an example I was setting for my children, that they could do anything they wanted regardless of their age, their circumstances. They just needed to put their effort into it. So,
Right, right. I remember meeting you, and I think you, at the first time I met you, I think you were working with Senator Orrin Hatch.
correct.
And you had been involved with the Senate Republican Hispanic Task Force, and you were working with 25 different senators at the time and community individuals. A good friend of both of ours, Jane Garcia, I think was the way I met you.
Yeah.
And from working with Senator Hatch, and you were, with him, he was at the head of the Judiciary Committee, and so you had a lot of responsibility in that area in terms of federal, judgeships and potentially the Supreme Court, nominees, and so you went from that position. Then now you're in the Senate, and then I remember you went to work with ASER. You became the executive director of ASER, and you were there, and then now you're working with Fortune 500 companies and helping to move the needle in terms of employment and philanthropy and governance and et cetera with the corporate America. And then you went to work with the Smithsonian Institute, and you were the head of Latino affairs and making an impact in the museums, et cetera, making sure that Latinos were prominent and our story is getting told. And then you became the treasurer of the United States. Um, wow, what a step! What a sense of accomplishment you must have had. Did you? How challenging was that for you? I mean, because that you're stepping out of your comfort zone so many different times and
Yeah.
saying, "I'm going to do this." I mean, just already you've indicated that you had children when you were young, but you completed school. You got a master's degree from Harvard University, and you got a law degree. I think even one time there was a situation when your daughter was one of your daughters was also a student while you were a student at the same university at George Mason, correct?
That's true, actually. Yes. She was
So,
getting a
so I mean,
master's degree. Yeah.
right. So I mean, you've had so many different things come your way, and yet you've been able to handle them. What was your where did you draw your strength and determination to keep going?
Ignacio, as you described them, I remember the fear that I had each time I started a new job. And there was a lot
Absolutely,
because you're in
absolutely.
a place where you've never been before. There are not many, if any, people who look like you, who have your experience. You feel a little bit out of place, even though you've got all the right credentials. And I remember that the thing that carried me through was what my parents had taught me. They basically to meet the challenges, because it's difficult to survive without a lot of education and money and resources. But what you do is you draw on your strength, your tenacity, and your drive to somehow provide for others. And what you also do is what my father showed me: you work harder. If you don't feel like you've got a grip on things, you put the extra time in, you put the extra effort, you work longer, and you make sure that you know enough about what the challenge is that you can conquer it. And that happened every single time. So the first time I was in the Senate, and it felt like a very foreign place. The first time I went to the Treasury Department, and I'm sitting there with a bunch of men, and there are no women,
Right.
there are no Latinas,
Right.
and you do the same thing. You do it over and over until you work hard enough and long enough until you feel like, okay, I can hold my own in this room.
Sure.
That, I think, was the thing that I appreciated most about what my parents taught me. And you know what? In order to survive, they were willing to try anything. I mean, my father literally became a jack of all trades. So if he couldn't find regular work because he was physically disabled, well, then he invented work. And that kind of example was incredibly important to us, because it showed us that no matter what happened, there's a way out. And I think often of the immigrants that come to this country and how they're driven here by need and really difficult circumstances often, but they have the kind of strength that makes them tremendous members of the community, because they are creative, they are innovative, they work really hard to make ends meet. Those are the skills that my parents taught me, and they made a difference in my life, because I was doing a lot of firsts throughout my time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There was nobody you could turn to and say, how did you do this? And that's a difficult road to go down, because it can be
It is.
so turn around and go back.
It is, Ignacio, but you and I both know that there are a lot of people who help you along the way. So maybe there isn't somebody who had a specific kind of experience that I was needing at that moment, but there were people who believed in you and who told you repeatedly, you can get this, you can do this. Just put your nose to the grindstone, you can get this done. And Senator Hatch, for example, one of the people you mentioned, whom I worked for, was a tremendous role model for me and mentor. I had family members who may not have had the same experience, but they really believed in me. So I had an aunt who would always sort of stand behind me and say, hey, keep on going, because we believe in you and you're going to make a difference. I had my parents who always believed in me and supported me, and especially my husband, because if you don't live with somebody who's also giving you positive messages, it can be really tough. Sometimes I tell
Sure.
people the most important thing you can do is marry well, because that person, if you select well, can be a tremendous friend and I guess ally in that process, especially when you think about raising children.
Exactly. Yeah. I've told individuals in the past that, that's one of the most important decisions you make in terms of your life partner, because that in many ways will determine your destiny. And,
Absolutely.
and, 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 you have to be very wise in that decision.
That's true.
Um, so, what did you learn about yourself in this process? Because, I know that you had so many challenges, so many obstacles down your path. You're the first in everything you were doing. I mean, I was looking through my wallet, and I was looking at my money, okay? And I came across, a $20 bill, a Jackson. This was 2006, and I was looking at it, and I said, "Well, this is you. Your name is on money that was
Yeah.
printed from what, 2005 to 2009, or
Pretty much, yeah. That's when I was in Treasury from '04 to '09, but the money didn't start getting printed until '05. And it actually kept on printing well after I left, so probably like 2011. Because the funny thing that people don't realize is that they have your permission to continue to print until they prepare new signatures for the currency, and so it can take a while, believe it or
right,
not.
right. But for forever, your name's on money. I mean, you started out, as this young girl in California, who at the age of 16 was possibly thinking of, just helping the family, and that would be your way of life, to having your name etched in, for life on our monetary system. And what an accomplishment. I mean, this just when you think about it, and the road you had to go, and the obstacles, you overcame them. But how difficult has it been to be a professional, a mother and a wife? Because you have to balance so many things in those roles. And you know, just to be a professional alone and accomplish what you accomplished is remarkable. But you've got these other responsibilities. You've got children, and you have a spouse, and your children are growing up. How difficult has that been for you?
You know, as we talked about earlier, it's really important here that you make the right choice about who your partner is. But the thing is, we don't do these things alone. And one of the hardest lessons I learned was that you cannot achieve everything, honestly. You can't do it all well. There is no way. So you need to set priorities. And one of the things that my husband and I did early on was say, no matter what we do, the family is the priority, the children are the priority. So when we're conflicted, the choice becomes easier. The other thing we did is we learned to be a good balancing act for one another. So when I couldn't take care of things, he did, and vice versa. If he needed support, I stepped in for him because he obviously had the same kinds of challenges. Although I'll tell you, being a mother is always a little more unique. You know, roles are improving. Support among men for women is improving. My husband has done a really good job, but he's gotten better over the years, and I think he admit that as well. And tremendous. He's actually a phenomenal individual. The other thing I was able to count on were my parents in the early years, the formative years for my children. My parents were there for me, and they helped me to make sure my children had a good start in life. And then my husband basically said, look, you can't do it all. So let's find some help. And a really silly example of that is I used to think that on top of everything else I was doing, working, taking care of the children, you know, being a good wife, and et cetera, I had to have a spotless house, and I had to do it myself. And
Yeah.
he finally said, look, let's just hire a housekeeper because we want a clean house, but neither of us has the time. And it was a big step, sounds silly, but it was a big step for me to finally admit I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it by myself. And so I could do a lot of it, but he was right. I needed help. So learning how to get help when you need it and accept it and accept the fact that you aren't going to do things perfectly. And between you and I made a few mistakes along the way. But what my parents taught me is you learn to correct from the mistakes that you make and try
Right.
to do a little better the next time around.
Yep. I think that's, you know, well said that, you know, we're going to make mistakes down this path. I mean, nobody can get it right the first time. And you have to sometimes just readjust and figure out, okay, that didn't work. I have to go down this other path now and figure it out. But well said. I mean, you know, it's such a, I guess, a testament to, you know, your ability to adjust along the way, because what you've done has been very difficult. And, you know, it's easy to sit here and for us to talk about it today, but there was a lot of hard work and dedication that went into that. So, you know, it's a testament. Um, you know, you also spent a little bit of time with the Inter-America Development Bank. What do they do, and what was your role with them?
You know, that was another one of my favorite jobs. I have actually loved everything I've done, and probably it was the fact that I got to experience so many different things in the course of my lifetime that really kept me engaged. But the Inter-American Development Bank is a lending institution. It's owned by 46 different countries. Shares in the bank are held by those countries, and they lend to other developing countries in Latin America to improve communities. And so they do private citizen loans as well as government loans, mostly government loans. They can do a federal government loan, a state government loan, even a county government loan. And they lend for projects that improve the quality of life there. Because, you know, that old adage, you know, a rising tide lifts all boats. The
Right,
idea is that if we can help
right,
people to live in prosperous communities, then they impact the rest of the world. And vice versa, right? So, you know, if they're suffering, then it has an impact on the rest of the world. So we spend a lot of time working on ways to improve the quality of life in Latin American countries. And I spend a lot of time working directly with the US Congress in helping them stay informed because the United States government was a shareholder. In fact, it was the largest shareholder and often made its decisions often influence significantly, if not determine the direction of the bank. So making sure we had a solid relationship with the U.S. government and that they understood, because occasionally we had to go back and say we need extra money for this or that. The good thing is this is a really interesting institution. It's never had a single loan defaulted on in the public sector. Some of the private sector loans may have had some trouble, but they have learned to negotiate that like any bank does. And essentially, it's a AAA rated institution. So phenomenal, great rate of return for people who invest in it. But occasionally we had to grow our capital, the size of our capital. And so we needed our shareholders, which were the 46 different countries, to make an investment. And so my job was mostly to convince them to do that and to help the rest of the world understand what we were doing.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Tremendous work. Tremendous work.
I loved it. It really makes a difference. I mean, what I saw them doing in the area, for example, of microfinance made a world of difference. So this is where you give small loans to people to start a micro-sized business, but that makes a difference for that family. They now can eat, they can send their children to school, they can put a roof over their head. In a lot of ways, it reminded me of my father, who had to be his own sort of, company. He, like I said, he used to collect trash. Well, trash collecting in Latin America is a type of business, a very serious business, where people take and use those things they find and turn it into some resources, financial resources for their family. It was very much like what I saw my own family do. And I know that it can make a difference in the quality of a family's life. So I was really proud to be contributing there.
Great, great. Now, you know, apart from everything that we've already discussed, which is so much, you've also been on boards. I mean, you've contributed time for certain causes. What are some of the boards that you've been on, and why did you select those particular boards to be a member of?
Well, I only go to work for things that I really truly believe in, and because there's just not a lot of time. Uh, I sit on the Navient board, which is one of the largest processors and holders of student loans for college education. And you know why that's important to me. This company does a great job of helping students pay off their debt once they've graduated college and maintain their credit rating, as well as collects their payments, et cetera. It does an extraordinary job because those are very difficult processes, and a lot of people don't understand how important they are. I also chair a bank board foundation that has a foundation that does microfinance lending in Latin America. So I've gone from working at the Inter-American Development Bank to working with a charity organization, a nonprofit organization that does very similar work, just in the area of microfinance and just in a number of countries in Latin America. I sit on as you and I both sit on the Comcast Diversity Board,
Yes.
and that's not really it's an advisory committee, but it really makes a difference in terms of trying to make sure corporate America understands the needs of the Latino community and can engage with them in a very constructive manner in the areas that you and I mentioned earlier, like employment, procurement, philanthropy, governance. It's a tremendous company that's doing a lot of great things and setting a great example for other corporations. And I work with a nonprofit called Lideramos, which is an organization dedicated to creating leadership skills in the Latino community all over the country, but especially at the grassroots level, so that people understand that they can make a difference in their local communities, and they use their own leadership skills, which are based in Latino culture, to make a difference. And so I really enjoy that very much. And then I have one other board that does nonprofit giving. It's called the Jesse Ball Dupont Fund, and it's located in Jacksonville, Florida. And they primarily give to the organizations that Jesse Ball Dupont, who married Alfred I. Dupont, and then subsequently created her own charity trust that lives on after her death, gives to the organizations she gave to in the course of her life. And continues to try to make a difference, because these were very poor communities, and they still are today, largely low income, some minority communities, but a wide, interesting mix of people and cultures. And they continue to try to make a difference by focusing on diversity, inclusion, equity, and placemaking. So I love what I'm doing today. It really makes a tremendous difference to me. And it's incredibly important for me. My parents taught me a long time ago that family is the most important thing. And family is much larger than just the people who live in your house. It's about community.
Right, right, right. Yep. You know, talking about family, and you mentioned, you know, a little bit of your parents, and you mentioned an aunt. Who were your role models, you know, when you were growing? I mean, we had to look somewhere and say, you know, wow, that person is, or maybe they touched you in a way that, and mentored you in a particular way that made a difference for you.
Well, I mentioned a few earlier, like Senator Hatch, who made a tremendous difference. But if you think about sort of when I was young, my real models were my family, my great grandparents, because they sacrificed so much, my grandparents as well, my parents. I think my mother was a tremendous role model. She managed to continue to move forward throughout a number of very substantial challenges in her life. And she was a tremendous example. My aunt, my husband has been a tremendous role model. He had a different experience, one that was very rich in terms of helping me to develop skills I didn't have before. And that was tremendous. You talked a little bit earlier about my name on the currency and how that was a tremendous mark. What makes me most proud about that is that my father's last name, which is Escobedo, which I kept as a middle name when I got married, so it's Ana Escobedo Cabral, is on that currency. And for me, that represents the sacrifices of many generations of people, my mother's family, my father's family, um, people who are really my true heroes, because, you and I have had challenges, but the challenges they had to leave everything behind, come here with absolutely nothing, and survive on so little, and often at great risk and peril, so that their children could have a better life. I mean, there's no better example. There's no better hero for me, and there's no better mentor. Everything I learned about how to be successful, I learned in my parents' home about love, faith, and commitment and hard work. Those are the things that made a difference. There were tremendous individuals like Senator Orrin Hatch who taught me how to leverage what I'd learned in a new world that could make a difference for communities, and that I needed. But honestly, those are my role models. I pray that someday when I meet up with them again, that they'll think I did a decent job of representing them, of somehow carrying on their legacy.
Oh, you have. You and I go back a little ways, and we can recall, how different things were. Um, Today we look at the Latino community, the Latinx community, and we say, wow, we're growing. We're 25%, of the public school education. It's going to be, one third in the next, 10 to 15 years. Tremendous economic power. What have you seen? What's been the most dramatic changes, that you've witnessed in community, in our community, as growth, and leadership, et cetera? What have been the dramatic changes, when you first started out, and what you see today in the
Well,
community?
yeah, I think that the thing that I'm most hopeful about is the fact that in addition to the numbers you mentioned, we see more and more of our community going on to graduate high school and go on to college. Not at, we haven't conquered that, but we made tremendous progress. And at the end
Right.
of the day, if we don't have the skills to contribute to the changing and evolving economy, our families are not going to fare well. So we really do need our kids to stay in school, graduate, get skills, go on and get post high school some sort of education or training. And it should let them follow their heart in terms of the things that they love, but it should prepare them to contribute in an economy that is rapidly changing and demanding more skills of us. I mean, it used to be in my father's time that you could get one job and have that for the rest of your life. And you and I know that people are changing jobs, many times over the course of their life. And now they're changing careers as well. So education is incredibly important, and we are not completely there, but we're doing better at it. And so I think we need to keep our focus on that. The other thing is, I mean, when I started out, being Mexican was a bad thing. And we didn't
Right.
call ourselves, even though we were Americans, we called ourselves Mexican because everybody referred to us as Mexican. I was in California. There were not very many other Latinos from other countries here at the time. There were Mexicans. And, I witnessed the evolution of the term we used to describe ourselves, right? So in California, we went from Mexican to Mexican American, and then to Chicano, and then to Latino, and then, US Hispanic, and then now we've got the Latinx, which it continues to sort of evolve the spectrum of where we are. And I think that's good. It is a way for us to sort of think of ourselves as a community that needs to support one another. But the other thing you need to remember is that we also are a very diverse community. I mean, there are 20 some odd countries in Latin America that we could be originating from, with different ways of speaking Spanish, different history, different culture, different foods, different music, different political ideas, different experiences. So we're as diverse as we are similar. And I
Right.
think the challenge for us is to continue to be able to respect those differences, understand them, take enough time to get to know one another, and then work together towards the greater good, which is ultimately the same thing that everybody on this earth wants, I believe, which is, how do I make sure my children have more than I did and have everything they need to be constructive, productive individuals in society, so that generations of my family continue to do.
Right, right. You touched on a little bit about, the changes that were made. What do you still see as the challenges going forward? Because obviously we're going to represent a lot of what should be happening in this country going forward, but what do you see the challenges in terms of making that a reality?
I think the challenges are still in some ways very much the same. It's about education. It's about helping people understand the value of that education. It's about starting to understand the needs of the community. I mean, we're in a very, you didn't raise it yet, and I hope it's okay if we're in a very politically divisive period in history. But the one thing that's great about Latino culture generally is that it is a culture that helps to understand and try to bring communities or individuals together. It's about sort of building bridges. And I'm kind of hoping we can be the glue that helps this country come together. Because
Right.
one thing I learned when I was in the United States Senate was the time when we were most successful was when both sides of the aisle reached across the aisle and said, let's
Right.
work together to solve this problem. We need to do more of that. And I'm hoping that we as a community can try to push our leaders to do that very same thing, because it actually is very much aligned with our culture, our traditions, our commitments, and our community values. So I think that's probably the biggest challenge we face today. Clearly, we have the skills and the technology and an economy that continues to thrive in ways that are incredible, actually. If you think about the fact that we shut down this economy a year ago nearly, and still we have performed well, that's been incredibly inspiring in my mind. But we also know that the people who got most affected during this period of time, and I think there'll be more and more data that suggests that, are the people that were at the lower income, less educated rungs, who didn't have the ability to work from home at a computer, comfortable and safe in their home, and continue to draw a paycheck. They were the ones who had to continue to try to make ends meet, go out, find work when they lost their traditional jobs, or squeeze pennies out of what they were doing because they had fewer hours, so that they could make ends meet. And that there happened to be that Latinos also suffered more significantly from the actual disease, COVID-19, died in greater percentages, had greater infection rates. A lot of that is because of circumstances. So if we don't alleviate the circumstances that they're living under, when again, that requires education, community engagement, and efforts to make sure that people have the skills and the resources and the finances they need to survive, but also one that respects their ability to and their values, so that they say, then they understand, hey, I'm a part of the solution as well. I need to engage. I need to be constructive. I need to get self-educated. I need to go out and put my skills to work. And I know that I need to engage in an environment that's changing very, very rapidly. We won't do well. So we need to, as individuals, look out for people who can't look out for themselves, but we also need to respect the fact that we truly believe people are capable of many great things. We've seen it in our own families and in generations. And so we just need to have them have the right skill sets to do that. Focus on that, I think, and we'll continue to do well.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that I've noticed, since over time, and has been the contributions that Latinas are making today. I mean, when I look back, and it was typically more male oriented in terms of the leadership and the accomplishments, et cetera. And when you look at the contributions today compared to years back, You were a trailblazer, no doubt, and because of that, there's many more Latinas who are now, participating and contributing, which is necessary because you have to have all people, in society participating, and we know that as a community that was excluded in so many different ways. And today we see Latinas really taking charge in so many different areas, whether it's in professional positions and in governance, et cetera, wherever it is, you're seeing a research, and especially in the college and university completion rates. Today, I've indicated before that the majority of graduates today are women, both at the undergraduate, master's, and professional levels. They're women, and so there's been a huge change there. And I think that the first Latina president has already been born, and that she's going to be the person that leads this country, or he, and through our most difficult days. And so we're now seeing that people like yourself can be the treasurer of the United States, and years back that wouldn't have been our reality, but it is today. And we know that we can have someone who's going to lead this country at the highest level, and be the president of the United States one day. And that person's already been born, and we'll see that happen, hopefully.
Mhm.
So things have changed so dramatically, but for the better. And I guess in spite of everything that we've been talking about, you still have to have a little bit of a social life, and what are your favorite hobbies? What do you do? I've heard that you're an excellent seamstress, as an example. That you actually did the dresses for your daughters, when they were married, and that you enjoy doing that. But apart from that, do you have favorite activities? Do you read a lot? Do you? I don't know what other kinds of social things you do. What do you do in your spare time, which is very little?
I
What do
don't
you
have a
do?
lot of it. That's true. I absolutely adore sewing. It's a skill I picked up as a child. Again, out of necessity. We didn't have any money, so we
Right,
we sewed. We used to
right.
take those old flour sacks. I don't know if you remember those. Flour used to
Yes,
come in a sack,
yes.
a cloth sack,
Right.
and so we turned those into a lot of interesting outfits. But later on in life, I got good enough at it that I made my own wedding dress, and I actually tackled the wedding dresses of my three daughters and my daughter-in-law. And I actually did a decent job, so I'm really happy about that. I also love to read. And my favorite reading is really historical biographies. So, George Washington, I love the founding fathers. I spend a lot of time reading about their lives
Right,
and
right.
love to look at it and what the lessons are from that period of history and what's happening today. Believe it or not, I also like to golf. My husband, if I don't golf, I turn into a golf widow. So I go out with my husband and we golf a couple
Excellent.
times a week as couples on Sundays and really have a great time doing that. And I think I probably share this with most everybody else in the country. I spend a lot of time working on my house. By that, I mean, I do a lot of it myself. So, uh, and I'm proud. Just, being able to work with your hands, which I know is something my father did all his life, and see the product at the end is just a beautiful sense of satisfaction. And so I spend a lot of time on home projects as well.
Ah, and I know you've got something going on right now. Actually, you indicated just as we were coming on, you've got a project going on that you're redoing your home as we speak.
I am redoing my home as we speak. This is one of the rare instances where I hired somebody else to do it. We're putting in a new tile floor at the lower level. And that's actually a big deal for me because I think in the last house, I put in 1,000 square feet of wood flooring, tongue and groove myself, all by myself. Well, that's not true. My daughter helped me a few hours, but otherwise myself. So for me, it's a big deal, but I'm really excited about it. And I hope they don't start working too soon because they might start making a little noise.
Okay, okay. So let me go to a final question then. And so what final thoughts, Anna, would you like to leave our audience with today? We've got people from all over the country, Mexico, Puerto Rico, who are joining us today. So what final thoughts would you like to leave the audience with in terms of what they should do in terms of persevering and making their way in life? Obviously, you're the greatest example we could give them, but what thoughts do you have that you would like to share with them?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that compliment. I'm not sure I deserve it, but I have a couple of things that I would say to them. The first is that nothing is impossible. If you want it, work hard and go get it. Um, I've talked again, it's almost like a broken record about the importance of education. Make a lifetime commitment to educating yourself and gaining more and more skills. That's incredibly important. The other thing is, surround yourself with people who believe in you and push the naysayers aside. Because sometimes, we have negative forces in our life. If you find those, try to eliminate them. The other piece of that is, I mentioned to you that there was a math teacher who made a difference in my life, and he just took a couple extra minutes, filled out a college application, and helped me find some scholarship dollars. But if you think about sort of the difference that made in my life for generations, it was incredible. And I do think that we can be a source for good, a force for good. And it doesn't take much for us to do that. A few extra minutes, somebody who looks like they're down and you just ask them how they're doing. It doesn't have to be heroic. You don't have to solve all their problems. You just have to show that you care. And I can guarantee you that if you spend just a little more time thinking about other people who are near you and engaging with them and seeing if there's something you can do, you will make a tremendous difference. And I really do believe it's important for you to go out for your dreams. But in the end, all of that is about making sure that we build communities and we build families and we give to one another. Otherwise, what's the point? It's not just for us individually. And I think being a little more aware of the community around us and trying to see if we can't make a small difference, just a small difference with a few extra minutes. And believe it or not, the payoff is going to be tremendous. It sends ripples forward of goodness through generations. So those are the things I would say. Go out and get it. Work hard, make sure you acquire education. And if as Treasurer of the United States, I have to say, you also have to spend a lot of time paying attention to your resources. Use them well. Know what credit is and what a budget is, and
Sure.
apply those resources wisely. Don't go into debt too much for one thing that really isn't worth it. Don't invest in a lot of depreciating assets like a brand new sports car if really the option is sports car or education. Which of those is the better value to make? So
Right.
those are the things that are important. I learned over the course of my lifetime. We didn't talk about it at the dinner table. We never had 2 nickels to put together, but I found that it makes a world of difference. So I encourage people to learn a little bit about that as well.
Tremendous message, Anna. Just you're an inspiration for so many. You've been a trailblazer, a role model for countless individuals. You've been a mentor, a mother, a wife, a great friend to so many of us. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's been an honor and a privilege to have you with us. And thank you for the message to everyone today. And we wish you well and look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you so much again.
It's always a pleasure to be with you, Ignacio. Thank you. You're very kind, and I appreciate the time too.
Okay. Good luck to you. Bye now.